know what to expect.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that differ too, right? Between if it's a private course or not a private course or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, with private classes, we want to spend some time with them before the class starts to understand their world better.
Do you try to get as much of that information beforehand as you can?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we have a whole list of questions to ask before a class. Who the products are, the customers, what the products are, what the customers are, who's coming into class, what are the biggest challenges, what should we avoid, that kind of thing. So the trainers, we try to get them synced up. So we'll be wanting to do that for CPA if possible.
Yeah, I had a chance. I did catch up with Anthony today. He looked pretty tired. But yeah, I don't know if you saw the email, but he shared his availability and everything. So he said, yeah, he said his only concern was just that it was a bigger class, and he said I'd kind of like to know who the players are involved and maybe just kind of talk to Carla to kind of see, hey, just if you have this many people involved and these are the different sides of things that, these are, you could have some conflicting outcomes here. So,
yeah.
So,
yeah, it'd be good to sync them up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hope it works out that she's able to jump. Well, I mean, she's keen, but it'd be nice if, and it looked like Anthony had a lot of availability too, which is good. So, which is kind of nice. It's funny. There was a lot of folks sharing some pictures and everything. I'm down in the office today because we've got some folks coming down I need to meet later. But it was kind of funny seeing a lot of those pictures kind of popping up all over. So
Mike was in there. Was Mike?
Yeah, Michael's in this morning. Yes, Michael. He comes to the office every day. I think just about.
Yeah. He
likes it. I think Brian's the same. Brian likes to come in every day too, and I think it's just. They both kind of agreed that they don't necessarily get a ton of work done from home.
Yeah.
So just kind of with distractions. So
you're sharing your screen right now. So you have some slides you're going to go through?
Just this one. I just like to have this one up to start as we enter, just to as a reminder to thank our sponsors and such. But once, like, I'll stop this once we kind of get the ball rolling here a little bit, and I'll pass the baton back over to you. So.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I just usually throw this on just to kind of right at the start for a few minutes as people are coming on, and then that's about it. Are you going to make us jealous with your weather today, Don?
It's 79 out. Yeah. So what's that? I got prepared for Celsius here. That would be high 20s, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Somewhere around there. Yeah. Mid 20s for sure. So, well, we can't complain. We still don't have any snow. I think they're kind of calling for that a little bit later on in the week, but
26.
Ugh. Yeah, that's nice.
Before we start, I'm just going to fill up my water.
Yeah, go do it.
I'll be right back.
Go do it.
Sure.
Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing good. Yourself?
Good, thank you. It's funny. I was just telling Don you're joining his class tomorrow morning.
Yes, and
he said that's awesome. He was quite excited.
Yeah, I joined his SAFE class last December, so
that's kind of cool. This is going to be this will be a lot of fun, I think, just because Don's going to do his presentation today in Mural, so it'll be nice and interactive.
Oh, good.
Yes, I think that'll be fun. So
I'll leave my camera off so I can eat my lunch.
That's usually the way everybody goes. I think everybody kind of likes to pop in and, kind of listen in and join in when they can. So
exactly. Did you have many improvers sign up?
I think I had a few. We'll see. I think people are going to try and do the same. They're just going to kind of pop in when they're able to, right? So hello, Fabienne.
Hey, how's it going?
Man, it feels like about a million years since you and I have been able to have a conversation, hey?
Yeah, we used to be so young when we were even talking.
Yeah, I know. Getting old, what are you going to do, right?
Keep on going.
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks for those of you that are joining. We're just having a little conversation with Don. We've got a few other folks on here as well. We're going to try and get started as quickly as we can right up to the high noon piece. So we'll make sure that everybody kind of jumps on. I know I'm excited for this one.
I'm rocking my Calgary shirt, Calgary Improving shirt for the
I noticed that. Good on ya. Good on ya. Where did you get that one from, by the way? Or who'd you steal it from?
I don't remember. I think it was when I was visiting the office up there. When I think about it, I asked for one of the shirts.
I'm sure I've asked you this, but when was the last time you were up this way?
Canada or Calgary?
Either.
It was the summer before COVID. I was up there. My aunt and uncle have a cottage up a few hours north of Toronto.
Nice.
Cottage country up there, I guess. So every summer we all meet there. All the families get together. That was the last time I saw my parents.
Oh my goodness, seriously?
Yeah, they live up in Edmonton. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
I know everybody's due for those family visits and everything. It's nice that things are finally starting to open up a little bit too, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll probably get to see them this Christmas.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Were they going to come down and visit you, or are you going to come up this way? You're not going to Edmonton at Christmas time, are you?
No. That's crazy talk. I have before, but so one of my brothers lives in Houston, and his wife is expecting. So they're going to come down, see the baby. But they'll probably be up here in Dallas for a bit, and then down to Houston for after that. Plans
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be good. Never a bad thing when family can kind of get together, especially these days. It's just a challenge. I think, there's a lot of people that are still uncertain about getting on flights and if they want to, and how all that looks, right? So.
And it's a lot harder traveling the border too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a feeling come December and January, I think a lot of us folks up this way will be really excited to get somewhere nice and warm. So, but there's a lot of people that really haven't gone on holiday in a long time. So
yeah.
Getting together with family and friends is kind of always a little bit of a challenge these days, right? So John's here. That's always nice. Saw Nicole jump on. Good to see. I like it. Wonderful, wonderful.
Good morning.
I think it is still morning, John, just barely, hey?
Yeah, I'm I've been underwater a bit, so definitely morning where I've come from.
Okay, fair. All right, well, we're just coming up to 12 o'clock, so everybody else can kind of pop in. I thought I would like to get this session started. I know Don has a lot to talk about and everything, and also he has lots of very, very interesting things to show us. So once again, as always, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have everybody, and I know it's a lot to take your time. So thank you very much for your time today. We're just happy to be able to be here for you guys. So my name is Kevin McPhee. I am the VP of programs for the Calgary chapter at the PMI-SAC. And today I'm really, really thrilled to present Don McGreal. He's coming in, and today he's going to have a discussion on how the changes to the 2020 Scrum Guide impact product owners. Now, the interesting thing is going over this with Don is this is going to be a really fun interactive session. So I know for those of you that are there having lunch, I think that, make sure that you're kind of able to kind of jump on your computers as well. In his role as VP of Learning Solutions at Improving, Don is a hands-on agile consultant and instructor. He is co-author of the Professional Product Owner, Scrum.org, professional Scrum trainer. He's authored, taught classes for thousands of professionals around the globe. He is also co-founder of tastycupcakes.org, which, if you haven't checked it out, it's a really comprehensive collection of games and exercises for accelerating the adoption of agile principles. I know there's a lot of times where in these sessions, we like to save our questions until the end, but Donna said, just jump on in whenever you can. So part of his presentation is going to reflect that as well. So you'll kind of see how it is. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Don.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone. So yeah, I do, like Kevin said, I want to keep this as in the short time we have together, as interactive as possible. So rather than like a 15-minute Q&A at the end, jump in. I'll pause from time to time if you have any questions at all. I've also put a link in the chat, and so you can either follow along from my screen to see what's going on. But if you want to click on there, then you'll have control to look around the different mural. We're going to do this with murals, tool I'm using here, if you haven't seen it before. And you'll be able to jump in and go back and forth. There's also a spot up top for questions. So if you want to just write a question there, and I'll pause and read through them. You can also put them in the chat, or like I said, just jump in and ask as we go. So I definitely don't, and you definitely don't want it just to be me talking at you for the next 50 minutes or so. I'll try to finish about 5 minutes to go, if just so that we can wrap up properly, and any extra questions that might be lingering. But with that, I can jump right in. So once again, it's in there, and I don't know, Kevin, if you could, if more people are coming in, I don't think they see the chat, so you can, and I'm not going to notice as participants join, but we might need to repaste that link for new people if they wanted to join to Mural directly.
No problem at all.
Cool. So just getting started here. There are some links. Kevin already made an introduction there, but if you want to learn more about improving, there's a link there. Here's my LinkedIn profile as well. If you're not in the Mural, you can just search my name on LinkedIn. You'll find me. It's unique enough, my last name. And a link as well to my book, The Professional Product Owner. So the product owner is a role I've probably played the most. This is one I have the most passion around in Scrum. And there's a bunch of things I've learned along the way, and a lot of it's in this book with my good friend and colleague, Ralph Jochum. And it really was about the experience I had as well of starting out as a product owner whose job was really just to write things down for people. I kind of thought I was like the secretary for the team at first, right? Writing detailed requirements down. And over the years, I learned that was like probably the least important part of my job. And as I learned to think more about the product and the business and the customer, I kind of took this journey from scribe up to like a proxy between the business and technology, up to more of a business representative, and finally into an entrepreneurial mindset, and really running it like an organization. The CEO, I like to think of the product owner as the CEO of the product. So that's what that book is about. And the Scrum Guide is here too. If you haven't read that, there's a link to it. But let's talk a little bit about what happened last year. So last year there was sorry, my throat's a little hoarse. I heard, Nicole, you have something similar. We were in Las Vegas, and it was very dry out there, and we were doing a lot of loud talking, I guess. And I'm teaching a class tomorrow, so I hope it's a bit better by then. So the Scrum Guide has a history of changing over time. The very first version of it was in 1995, and it was called the Scrum Development Process and Project Control Facility Software, I guess is what it says there. That's a picture of the original document. They took that at scrum.org and sent it to me for this presentation. I've done this presentation a few times. It was 23 pages, was the original document on Scrum. And then in the early 2000s, Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, said, I'm going to document this thing and have lawyers look at it. And maybe we even get to a point where it's copyrighted to use it. Maybe there's a fee structure or some sort of attribution. And he realized that was way too much. 163 pages, completely documented. And he said he spent the next 10 years removing pages from that document, removing things essentially from Scrum. Because really what they're going for was a framework that was very flexible. So ultimately, there's a core framework that's immutable that we can't change. And then everything we do on top of that, we can experiment with, we can add on to Scrum. So it whittled down to 16 pages was the official Scrum Guide launch in 2010. And I'm not going to go over every little thing here. You can look at them yourselves, but you may have heard terms like the pigs and the chickens and stuff like that from like old school Scrum. And that's where that comes from. And some other things in there too. And then in 2011 to 2013, 17 pages was pretty much similar. They put in, they changed here, artifact transparency. They created artifacts for that. And the focus on value is a big part of it, right? Rather than just on time, on budget, they focused instead of value. And the Scrum values were added in 2016. And then a few other changes in 2017 that were about 19 pages. Now, in the latest version, they changed those 7 core elements that they wanted to update. And the point up till now is that this thing is always changing, always adapting, as it should, right? It's a complex world, and Scrum is teaching us how to deal with complexity. So it itself is adjusting and changing too. And I did have the opportunity to work with people on this update. So I got to see a little bit about why they made the changes that they did. And here are the main ones that we're going to cover here, but a little bit more of the slant on the product owner role. But I feel I need to pause right now. I've been talking a bit, just kind of laying out hopefully a little bit of history there. And any questions so far about the Scrum Guide and where it came from and that kind of thing? And we all good? It's a little bit hard. I don't see anybody. So if anyone's not camera shy, it really does help. I like Kevin, I like Nicole, but I see them all the time. So if anyone wants to jump on and show me your smiling face, that helps sometimes.
And this is a completely open discussion too, so we just jump in. There you go, Fabiana. I know you're going to have some questions.
It does help. Otherwise, it's like you're talking into a black hole, right? So if you have the ability to, it does help when we make it more of an informal conversation.
Absolutely, Don. Sometimes when I have meeting with the teams and perhaps I am going to be asking the ladies, hey, let's go on. No, Fabian, I haven't done my hair, so no way. I am not going to be turning on my camera.
Yeah, we all have our reasons, and that's fine. But if you have the ability to, I always encourage it. If you're about to chat out on a big sandwich or something over lunch, I understand you may not want to be everybody looking at you. Okay, so these are the core 7 changes, and let's talk a little bit about them. The main thing I found was different especially for product owners, was the top one here. It's now one team, and it's focused on one product. And now there's a reason for this. I'm going to bring us over here. So you may be, if you're joining, I'm looking over at the Scrum Rules one, and I can summon everybody here too. I'm going to bring you all to this area. Now, what it used to be was that it looked a little bit like this. We call this the Mickey Mouse diagram over here, where a lot of people would describe Scrum this way, is that you've got the development team, and then you've got the Scrum Master and the product owner, right? So if you want to, ask a question or you want something, then you've got to go to the product owner, who then goes to the development team, or you go to the Scrum Master, and then they will talk to the development team or the product owner or whoever. Or even worse, if the development team has a question, they either have to talk to the product owner, but one of the problems I noticed is that they didn't even have a good relationship with the product owner. They would ask the Scrum Master, who would then ask the product owner, who would then ask other people outside. And it kind of created this handoff after handoff, wasteful stuff, right? You get the telephone game that happens a lot. And the development team had this sort of reputation in many places as like this group we would keep in the basement, like feed pizza under the door to them and not let them talk to anybody in the actual business or customers. God forbid they ever speak to a customer, right? We can't have that. But more and more, the most successful teams I've worked with is when we all have a relationship with the customer, we all believe in what we're doing, and we are full product teams. We are all focused on product, all of us, and we have the ability to talk to them. So if you're a product owner and you get a team that doesn't want to talk to a customer, then I believe it's part of your responsibility to kind of make those introductions and build a relationship with them. The more they understand that the work they do is improving somebody's life, then the better decisions they're going to make and the more motivated they'd be as well, right? They end up building a passion for this if they actually get some face time with them. And I found as a product owner, it saved me a lot of time when they could go directly outside and just ask a question to an expert outside. Why not? If I don't trust that relationship, that means there's a problem that we need to go fix, right? So to avoid this sort of team within a team mindset with the Scrum Master or the development team and the Scrum team, a development team inside of a Scrum team, what we try to do is align ourselves a little bit more with that sort of product thinking in Scrum, where there's one team, the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the product owner together inside of this team. They also started changing the roles away from, let me see if I can do this, away from roles, because we didn't want Scrum to make the assumption that they know the right roles for your team, your organization. And they introduced another topic here, or another word, I guess, called accountabilities. Accountabilities. So instead of roles, you'll see this term a lot more. And in the Scrum Guide, it's a set of accountabilities. So the product owner has a set of accountabilities. And now the way you should look at that is who in our existing organization should take on those accountabilities. And somebody has to. One person must take on these accountabilities. So that means you don't have to go necessarily change titles and roles that you already have in your organization. If you're a project manager and you look at the accountabilities of a product owner, which is around working with the customer and understanding the vision and establishing the vision and managing the budget and that kind of thing, then likely you could be an excellent candidate to take on the product owner responsibilities. And we're not asking you as a project manager to change your title. If you're a project manager that's more focused on motivating the team, bringing Scrum to them, making sure we have a process that's adapting over time, then you could take on the Scrum Master accountabilities because they're ultimately accountable for the process. Do we have one, and is it being changed? Not owning it, but accountable for for having one, right? So these are the core changes that we're talking about. First is how they've reframed this. The Scrum team is made up of 3 sets of accountabilities, and it's one team now. And we're all focused on the customer, all focused on the product here. So that's the first big thing I found that change that really has kind of, if you were all of the things we're going to talk about, if you've done Scrum before and you've had success with it, you're probably already thinking this way. And that's a lot of us were saying when the Scrum Guide changes is Scrum, we're not changing Scrum ultimately. We're making sure we're doing it the right way. It's being implemented the right way. And if you already were, it's not a big difference. It's not going to change much of your world at all. Does that make sense so far? Any questions? I would check the question bank up here, but nothing. Anything at all for anyone?
I would say that one of the biggest challenges, Don, is that some organizations, they believe that they know what does it mean doing agile methodologies and everything, and they are not really at that maturity level. And then you start having some fighting about the different stakeholders. Who is going to be at the end of the day the person who has the final yeah or no of a piece of a scope or feature or epic or something? And that is where I am finding more of the company to have so many problems. It's about having that defined, as you say, accountability or
Decision maker.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very clear now in the Scrum Guide that the product owner is accountable for the product backlog, its order, and the most valuable things on there. And there's only ever one. It'll never be a committee. And if that's hard in an organization, it isn't Scrum that's the problem. It's that's going to cause issues with or without Scrum if you don't have one person to make those decisions. Now, it also says something interesting in the Scrum Guide. Even though the product owner is accountable for the product backlog, it doesn't necessarily mean they're responsible.
Mhm.
They can delegate responsibility. You can never delegate accountability, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Right? I'm ultimately accountable for my taxes.
Mhm.
I can delegate the responsibility of getting them done, to an accountant or my daughter. She's not, so she probably wouldn't be a smart choice. But whoever I delegate to, if they mess it up, I'm ultimately accountable for it. And that's kind of what we're talking about here with that role.
Mhm.
As a
Mhm.
good product owner who's really focused on the enterprise and the customer, you're not going to have time to write all the detailed acceptance criteria for everything in your product backlog. So you got to delegate to people you trust, people on your within the Scrum team, your developers. Developers can be analysts and business analysts and subject matter experts. You got people outside that you delegate the responsibility to as well. So
And you're bringing another key point, which is the trust.
Yeah.
When perhaps you are trying to be getting, let's say, certain key people in the business to be talking with the developers, sometimes that is where we have some challenges, because perhaps developers, they are not used to be dealing with the customer, and sometimes they can be going nuts because they're coming back to me and say, Fabian, how this guy is going to be asking me this time? So I am trying to see how I can expose more to be having that interaction and to build that relationship, but that is a big challenge that I can see in real life is happening right now.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So that's kind of that overall model, right? Is away from Mickey Mouse and more one team. And I'm the one that I used to draw it like this all the time, but it made it seem like there was like 3 different factions. It's one group, one circle. So that's the first one. The next one is we talk about a home for sprint goal, definition of done, and product goal. Now, there's one of these which is hugely important to the product owner, and that's the product goal. And we'll get to that. Before the 2020 Scrum Guide, the definition of done was mentioned, I believe, in almost every version of it. Sprint goal was brought in, and we can check our little handy guide here. Sprint goal, I think, was brought in. I don't see it right off the bat here, but I believe it was this one in 2013. I thought for sure it was in that one. But so sprint goal wasn't always part of Scrum, and it was introduced. But what were they? Right? There was no real home for them. Like we know that the product owner is a role or an accountability. We know that a product backlog is an artifact, and that the daily Scrum is an event. These had terms. That's what they were. But what was a definition of done or a sprint goal? They were just kind of like hanging out there. Do we have to do them to be successful in Scrum? Are they mandatory? They were just kind of mentioned in the guide. So now they really focus them on, the term that we came up with was the term commitments, which is one of the values of Scrum, one of the 5 values. DoD and sprint goal and product goal are commitments. So the definition of done, that is a commitment for, and I'm going to move this up here if you're following along. This is a commitment for the increment here. Oh no, it's not showing up. Sorry, Mural's been acting a bit funny from time to time, but let me get this done again. Move this, bring to the front, see if that works. There we go. So it's a definition of done. I'm just going to put here. Imagine it's next to increment. I don't know why it's disappearing on me here. I'm going to unlock that. There we go. There it is. So it is a commitment. The definition done is a commitment to the increment. What do we mean by that? How do we know the increment is done? Well, when we check the list, the boxes on the definition of done. So the definition of done are all the things that we've agreed to. We need in order to say this is complete. And there's a great new line in the Scrum Guide that says, and let's see if I can write this here. So what it says is, make sure it doesn't disappear on me. There it is. It says the moment a PBI, so by PBI means a product backlog item. I'm not going to write it all out, but an item on the product backlog meets the definition of done, an increment is born. And that's a great way of looking at it, is rather than waiting till like the end of a sprint and saying, okay, let's build the increment, let's finish up that increment with all the testing, we kind of give that idea is that the moment we take any one of these things off the product backlog here, the moment we take one of those things off and have it meet that checklist of done. So that could be that all the testing is complete or the right documentation has been created and we've met all the legal things, whatever that is, we actually have an increment that could have potential value to our customers. We could release it if we wanted to at that point. So as we go through, even early in the sprint, getting an increment to done means it's, or getting a PBI to done means we have an increment. That's the commitment of the increment. It is done, right? That makes sense? And then the sprint goal. So given that, if the definition of done is the commitment for the increment, what would you say the sprint goal is the commitment to? In the same vein, how do we know blank is done when we've achieved the sprint goal? Anyone want to take a guess at that while I figure out my mural stuff here?
Backlog.
The sprint backlog, yeah. And so the sprint backlog is where we would stick this one up here. And there it goes again. Sorry, this has just been happening in the last, we've noticed the last little bit, the layering is messed up, but there it is. So the sprint backlog, how do we know that the work in the sprint is complete? When are we considered complete in that sense? When we've met the sprint goal. So all that work that we're doing in the sprint backlog is really ultimately about fulfilling the sprint goal. That means we could be successful, even if we don't get every little thing done, as long as we meet the sprint goal, we're good. Yeah. So a high level kind of, it's like a vision, a mini vision for the sprint as opposed to the overall product. What is that cohesive thing we're trying to achieve here that's meaningful? What impact are we trying to create here? That's the sprint goal. And then in terms of from a product owner standpoint, and this is completely new in 2010, is the product goal. So just like the sprint goal has a commitment, the product backlog also has a commitment called the product goal. So the sprint goal is to the sprint backlog as the product goal is to the product backlog. And as a product owner, something I've had to live through, and if you've done Scrum before, actually, if you've done any kind of managed any sort of project before, the big danger is that you just have a list of just this unending list of stuff, completely unrelated. Somebody's moving it there, but I had to whoever moved it, if you could just hit undo, it should come back up top. There you go. Thank you. If I lock it, then I'm gonna lock it. There we go. Now you can't move things. In Mural, it's not when, if it gets moved, it's when. Somebody will eventually move something that you don't lock down. So the product goal is the goal for the product backlog. It's rather than a random smattering of work that's just being asked for by different stakeholders and managers and customers, we just throw it in a list and then just work through it. The product goal is meant to give us some focus. And usually time bound, 6 months to a year, not much more than that. Even though this product may go on forever, what are we going to try to do in the next 6 months? So it's meant to be a measurable, time-bound goal. And when I was a product owner, what I would use is, if anyone ever's heard about 4DX before, 4 disciplines of execution, they have a concept. The first discipline of execution is to establish a WIG, a wildly important goal. And that's sort of, I map it to that pretty easily. So what a WIG looks like is this. Change, some baseline, I guess, some baseline measurement. I'll put it down here. By an amount, by a date. Something simple like that. So it's something that we should be able to measure along the way. I want to increase sales by 20% by the end of the year. That's an example of a goal. So ultimately, what's our vision? What are we trying to do with this product? And then what is something we can measure along the way? So like when we're working on our website right now and improving, and one of ours is to increase website conversions for training by 20% by the end of this year, by 2021. And so every time we make a release, and we're measuring that, and we're all excited about, hey, how are we moving closer to this goal? And we hope that most of the stuff in the product backlog, not everything, because there's other things that happen, is getting us closer to this goal. And then once we achieve this goal, we pull another goal, maybe from our roadmap. What are all the other things we're trying to achieve? Bring it in, then we work towards that. So it's the commitment to that product goal.
So
Does that make
Don-
sense? Yes.
Don,
Yes, Peter.
when in the cycle do you establish the product goal and then revise it? Like, is it purely time bound, or is
So-
it after you've discovered things in the backlog you no longer want?
Yeah. There's a comment, or there's a line in the Scrum guide that says you can only ever have one product goal. And in order for you to change it, you have to, in order to take on another one, you either have to complete the existing one or abandon it. You can have lots of goals, other things to measure, but only one product goal. So the way I would do this is, when I was a product owner, the hardest thing was keeping this product backlog in line. It very quickly can get out of control. I went with a customer a few years ago who told me they had 3,500 items in the product backlog. Just first thing I said is, don't call it a product backlog. It's because it's not. It's just a list of stuff, right? It's a polite way of saying it. If you do one thing a day, which is going to be quite the clip, that's 10 years worth of work. What are the odds that there are things on here that never get done? So, and I know this is a long answer, but I'm getting around to it because this is an important point. Is what allowed me to cope with that was time bounds. I created time boxes for work, not because any manager was asking for them, just so that I could say yes or not yet to things. So if I was building a list of stuff to build to do in Scrum, I would create a date. Nobody was asking for it, but here we are in November. Why don't we say by Q1 of 2022? And anytime something comes along my desk, I would go, are we expecting this to be done by Q1 of 2022? And if whoever's asking for it says, well, yeah, of course, and I already have a pretty full backlog, I go, well, look at what we had. Is it more important than all of this stuff? And surprisingly often they say, no, I just don't want you to forget it. We need this done at some point. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to add this to my roadmap over here. It's not even going in my product backlog. Or I could ask the question, how does this fit into the product goal? If it doesn't, likely I'm going to consider this for a future product backlog, as a future product backlog in my roadmap. So I would only have that I'd have that time box anyways. And then as we would get closer, let's say we start come February, maybe January, February 2022, our product backlog's getting depleted. I would pull the right players in and go, all right, let's start to build out of all these ideas that have come, because we've probably gotten a lot let's look at our roadmap. It's grown now. Let's build a product backlog for the next 6 months or the next quarter, whatever the right clip is, not much more than a year. And then let's establish a new product goal. So maybe this is like a quarterly meeting, like I like to do, like a replenishment meeting for the product backlog to look at existing future considerations and establish a new product goal, a new direction for where we're heading. Other times my product goal goes obsolete, so we abandon it and pick another one, and we'd have to call another meeting like that with the right players. So I know that was a long answer, but there's a lot more to it, right? And I wanted to kind of establish that foundations. And so I think the original thing you were asking was, well, when do you do this? And because I usually have these sort of, right, when I see the light at the end of the tunnel and we're getting there, that's when I pull people together, because we're not just creating a new product backlog or a new product goal. We're re-upping the product replenishing the product backlog in accordance to the new product goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just another question. Do you have an idea of how many items do you tend to carry in the product backlog for a given product goal? Is there any guideline there?
It's a good question. And I have an answer, only from what I've seen. This is more the world according to Don. This is not anything official in Scrum, but I've just noticed the right number. In my most successful projects, I've seen consistency there, not trying to achieve it, right? But when I put those same boundaries up for myself, about 6 months worth of work, 6 months to a year, I often see it somewhere between 50 and 100 items. Once you get up above 100, I don't know, I wouldn't be good at managing that kind of thing. And I bet you if you just put that time box out front of you, 6 months down the road, and you say, what are all the things we can do in 6 months? Just naturally, it would probably end up being under 50 things.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I was just going to say that sounds similar to my experience, that once you get beyond 100, you can't manage it and it just drifts. So I've spent a lot of time with various clients persuading them to keep the backlog to 100 items, and anything that's over a year, maybe you just turf it, because if it's over a year, you probably won't ever do it. And boy, it's a very tough sell to get people to turf things. So I mean, one trick was just to say, well, how about we close it, but we won't delete it, and that way, should you ever want to, you could filter on closed items. But it's an interest. I like the concept, but I found in the past it's very hard to get product owners to buy into this.
And I think it's the way, not saying no, but saying not yet, right? So one concept I came up with was the water line. And so we would create it. So I would put that deadline like 6 months in the past. So you see, if you're looking at my screen, it's like this blue line that I would draw. And I say, that's our water line. And based on what we know so far, I mean, this is how much work we can get done by the water line. Anything below is going to be, I'm not going to put it in the backlog. I'm going to add it over here below the water line, which means we're not going to look at, we're only going to pay attention to stuff above the water line. So when I'm not saying we're going to get rid of these things, I'm going to say, let's just move it below the water line so it doesn't get involved. And we'll look below when it comes to that replenishment event. We'll take a look at all the things below the water line for consideration for the new one. And essentially what we're going to do is move a bunch of stuff up above that water line in that meeting. And so we're not ever saying no or turfing things, right? We're just saying not yet. We're just pushing it down. And the more people ask for them, then we know they're important, right? And if we did get rid of them, it'll come back if it's important, right? Somebody's going to bring it up. Right. So the water helps me.
So the items below the water line, are they actually in a different kind of backlog? Like you've mentioned roadmap. Is there a different location or a different tool or something to mark those things in?
Yeah, it really depends on the tool I'm using, and then I'll figure out a way. But I've done everything from stickies on the wall, where I had one area for roadmap items where it wasn't any order to it. It was just like, it was just labeled as like Q3 2023, like just ideas for the future. And I would move things into that. I see somebody, Lisa, you just posted there, parking lot. I've seen that concept too. Let's just park it for now. Now, if you're using a tool like Jira, you can create another list for these things, right? Another, I think they may even be called backlogs, but you could just create another one and just throw it in there. Like this is future backlog items or parking lot items, and then have a look through that and create a new product backlog for your project, or bring it into your existing project from this other list. I do that all the time with these tools. Like, and I don't want to get too far down that road, but I've done it for like technical things that I don't want to deal with as a product owner as well, like technical debt items. We've got to do them. I don't want my customers needing to look at that. They shouldn't even question those things. We're doing them behind the scenes. So I had teams that have like a wall of debt area where whenever they found stuff they want to clean up, they would add to that. And I kept my product backlog clean of those, even though technically you could say they're in the product backlog, but I didn't want to have to mess with them. I trust my team to make those decisions. In every sprint, I want stuff done from my product backlog while dealing with debt. So they pull stuff in there. So I'd have another list for future ideas as well. I've done it in a spreadsheet where I literally have a line And everything above it is what we're doing, and everything below it, we don't. I've done that as well. I literally create a water line. That's how I first started using. Anyways, I'd love to go on about that one, but I know it's important, but let's move on. So those are the three core things here. These are called commitments, and that was a big change as well. So not only every single artifact in Scrum now has a corresponding commitment to it. And so our commitment in the product backlog is to achieve the product goal. So it gives us that focus. And every sprint, I like to ask the question, how's this sprint getting us closer to the product goal? And the answer should be the sprint goal. If we achieve the sprint goal, it should get us closer to the product goal. Yeah. And then, okay, so those are two of the main ones, right? We've got one team and now the commitments aspect of it. Also, even it's less prescriptive. It went from what was it, 19 pages down to 14 pages. I thought it was 13 pages, but yeah, we literally went through it and saying, hey, this is duplicate information. This isn't as important. Or yeah, this is a thing, but there's plenty of teams that are successful with Scrum without doing it. So maybe I could throw out a few examples here. I'm going to ask you guys, what are the 3 questions in the daily Scrum?
So what did I get done? What do I plan to do? And what is stopping me from getting?
Do you have any impediments?
Those questions are no longer in the Scrum guide, but they're prevalent out there, right? Everybody knows about them. But the problem is, in many cases, any template, it becomes robotic. You just answer the questions, you fill in the blanks, right? And then you're done. But the real point of this thing is to create a plan for the sprint or a plan for the day. We're adapting our plan. The sprint backlog represents the plan for the sprint. It's probably not perfect. When is a good opportunity to adjust it? In the daily Scrum. It's a planning session. The best teams that have been at it for a while, they don't ask those 3 questions. They just go up to a board or something and just have a bunch of move things around and say, are we good today? Yeah, let's go. Let's get to work. 5 minutes. So it's not as prescriptive. It doesn't have here's the way to run it. I think it says something like some teams go through questions, others do it in other ways, walk the board or whatever. But we leave that up to the teams to figure out. It's not about the questions, right? It's about the plan. Doesn't mean they're wrong, but as long as that helps them build a plan, then we're good. But they can experiment in other ways if they want to as well. Another one I can think of is in the retrospective. It used to say you would take items from the retrospective and you had to put the action items into the sprint backlog. Sounds like a good idea, but let's leave that up to the team on how they want to manage that. Right? So no rule about adding the items to the sprint backlog, right? The outputs to the sprint backlog. That's gone. And there's a bunch of other ones too. But those are some examples of how it's just easing up and letting people figure this out for themselves. I think maybe in terms of product ownership, one is it used to say that product backlog items should have the following attributes, like a name, obviously, but like a size or an estimate, value, all the things you could do, but not necessary. A lot of teams don't put estimates on these things and they do just fine, right? So, less, it's not as, I don't know how to say it, but it's not as strong on what needs to be on the backlog items. It's whatever you want it to be, right? I work with a tax company and they just have like IRS law changes, a list of those on there, and that's it. That's their product backlog. They just work through that and they figure out what they have to do based on those law changes. And they don't need much more than that. And it works. So there's less prescriptive. Introduction of product goals. So we already talked about that. Good. So I guess I would check that one off. Self-managing over self-organizing. So this one's an interesting one where we used to say there's 2 parts of this. There's no more development team. So the 2 things that were always associated with development teams was cross-functional which means that together they have what it takes to build value. They don't have as many dependencies on other outside forces. So they together as a team are cross-functional and self-organizing. So that worked fine when it was the development team. Into front, there we go. So that worked fine when we're talking about just the development team here. I'll draw that little arrow, but we're not anymore. Now what we're dealing with is the Scrum team. There is no development team, right? There are developers. So how do we define a Scrum team? Self-organizing, not self-organizing, but self-organizing still works. Sorry, cross-functional still works, but self-organizing, maybe not so much. Maybe we need something stronger. So what we talked about here was self-organizing meant deciding on who does the work and how to do it. But it wasn't what we do. What we do is determined by the product owner. Excuse me. So now we say they are self-managing, meaning they do not need a manager on the outside. They could, but for Scrum doesn't insist on it. So they could manage themselves, which means they decide on who does the work, how it's done, and what they're working on. They're completely self-managing in that sense. So who, how, and what being the key, I can't just pull that one. What being the key difference here, because now the product owner is part of the Scrum team. So that's kind of the one change going from self-organizing to self-managing, and the reasons why. You know, now that we weren't pointing to a development team specifically, we asked, should self-organizing still be the case? Well, now the product owner is part of it, we can add what to it, which would be the managing piece as well. All the tools necessary to move forward within the Scrum team. Make sense? Any questions on that? Cool. And what else? 3 sprint planning topics. I like this one. Good teams are doing this anyways, where it used to say that when planning a sprint, I guess it's right here if you're following along. When planning a sprint, there were 3 topics that we wanted to cover. It was, what are we going to do? And how are we going to do it? So what was essentially, what are we going to take off of the product backlog into the sprint? So where are we going to draw the line here? And I guess there's an example of a line right here. So which line are we going to use? And we make this a different color. Let's say the stuff above the green line is what we're going to take into the sprint. That's what we're going to do. But then what they needed to do is take these things and break them into smaller pieces into sprint backlog items. That was how are we going to do it? So with the product owner, they can decide what, but together the developers decide on how. So that was always the case in Scrum. So many people would like to divide the meeting into 2. First half, what? Second half, how? It made for a nice way to facilitate it. Well, now we're saying they also need to ask why. Why are we doing this? Why would we create, why would we do this sprint? Like if somebody said, why are we doing this sprint? There should be a cohesive answer. And the answer to that should be the sprint goal, right? So the sprint goal is determining what the sprint goal is answering why we're doing the sprint. And then the what is what are we doing off of the product backlog? And then the how are all the items in the sprint backlog. So these are the 3 parts. So it's good to kind of make them clear, or I like if you're in a room together, just having 3 big sections, what, how, and why. And so and fill them in, right? Here's our product backlog. What are we taking from the product backlog to put in the what area? How are we breaking each product backlog item into pieces? That's the why area. And then up top, we have a big, or that's the how area. Up top, we have the why, which is the sprint goal. And then by the end of the sprint planning session, all 3 should be answered. Yeah. Does that make sense? Any questions there? clear as mud. And the last one is overall simplification of language for a wider audience. So this was huge for me and improving in general, because right now, I think our top two customers, the largest clients, are applying Scrum outside of software. And even though they removed the word software from the Scrum guide years ago, or coding, reading it, you could still tell, right? We would pass the Scrum guide to people, and we would train a bunch of drilling engineers at an oil company on Scrum, and they would go, it still feels a little software-y, because the word like testing was in there, the word system was in there. So this was rewritten through a whole new lens. In fact, we had people not in software go over it to sort of see, does this still make sense? So it was really much, because this wouldn't have been done if we hadn't seen the actual, benefits to, as improving. We are a software company. That's what we did. But we've had clients say, hey, I know what you did with our IT department, but do you think it would work at marketing or HR or sales? And at first we were like, I don't know. We don't know much about that. Like us consultants that are doing this, but we can tell you how we do it in IT, and you can tell us. And we started doing that, and then started seeing a lot of success, giving us more confidence as well in how to make this work more generically. And now the new Scrum guide reflects that. The language is easier. It's a much wider audience. Ken Schwaber himself, so the co-creator of Scrum and the owner of Scrum.org, said he has somebody he knows that's using Scrum to work with his autistic child. And so they put a bunch of experiments in a product backlog, and each week they try something else. They pull it on, and they work through that, and they look at the results of that. And that's the increment. And the actual answers they get, the details they get back, is the increment. And they try something else. And he says, I want Scrum working for people like that too. Right? My wife and I use Scrum to renovate our kitchen. Yeah, she loves it when I do that. All the stickies on the wall, and our sprints were the weekends, right? So we have full-time jobs, and we're not doing this every day, and it's not like we're doing a daily Scrum, but so we made sprints were weekends. We still made it work that way. Every morning we get together and look, okay, what could we do this weekend? Every morning of the weekend. That's all we do. Friday night, we would look at basically sprint planning. We still want to have fun this weekend. So given that, we've got 20 things to do. Let's take one thing to do this weekend. Can we do that? And then I guess our review and retro was done at dinner Sunday night with a glass of wine, and then we try again next weekend. So it can be in reading the Scrum guide. It should apply for all of those scenarios. As long as you're building something unknown that you don't do all the time, it's complex. There's still a lot of variables. That's the sweet spot for Scrum. If it's something you do over and over again, and you don't need to be creative in the way you solve the problem because you've done it before, then Scrum is admittedly overhead, right? And so it clearly states it is designed for complex product development, and services are products, and so it's a wide range. It's a wide net in that sense. Make sense? So we've got a few minutes left. Hopefully that gave you sort of an idea of those are the core changes. I encourage you to read it again if you've already read it, just maybe with that in mind, and maybe with why these decisions were made could help as well. There are other changes, but I think especially from a product owner standpoint, those are the main ones. Any other questions at all I can help answer?
I have a question, Don. You were talking throughout this, you mentioned quite a few of these things that you like that have been new to the Scrum guide. So I'm going to put you on the spot here and get out your crystal ball. What do you think maybe should be done next, and what is going to be done next?
This is funny. Just today, there was an email going around about the next version. I just saw it. But the answer was really, Ken and Jeff need a break. Working on this one together, Ken and Jeff, the creators of Scrum, strained their relationship quite a bit. Oh, this is recorded, right? I don't want to.
Yeah.
and they're going to take some time, and I think it's good. They're fine with it. I know I have a regret, and I would like to see change moving forward. One is this word developers. Everybody agreed that development team needed to go, right? The team within a team, it just wasn't fitting. If you've read any of the stuff, like the product in the product world, like the Inspired book by Marty Kagan, and they talk about product teams all the time. And usually them come down on Scrum because they think that Scrum is like, they're not all one team. And that was never the case, right? So having just the one Scrum team, you could call a product team, and it would map a lot with that, Silicon Valley product thinking. It works perfectly in that world. But because of that, there needed to be a new name for these folks right here. What do we call them? A generic group of people that are focused on doing the work, right? Not programmers. And so the word developer in IT means something specific, but in an energy company, it doesn't. It works outside of IT very well, the word developers. So I've thought about this for a while, and we actually went through like weeks researching different words for this. Makers was one. Creators, but that has all sorts of other connotations too, right? And I would challenge people all the time to come up with, whenever we talked about this, I would challenge the people I'm talking to, is like, what would be a better name? I agree it's not the perfect one. QA people look at this and go, well, I'm not the programmer, but you are a developer. And that's what we're trying to make that point. And that fight is an easier one. And that's one I'm happy to take on. So I would ask people all the time, like, well, give me a better one. And what would you change it to? Nobody could, until I did talk to one person earlier this year. And I did the same thing, knowing that nobody could come up with it. And he goes, well, it's easy, product developers. And I know it probably is just words and stuff, but it makes a lot more sense to me. You've got the product owner and then the product developers, which when you say somebody's a product developer, programmer doesn't just come to mind that easy. And everything else is two words: Scrum Master, product owner, product developer. I think that would have done the simple change that would have gotten us around a lot of just like confusion and annoyance from a lot of people who threw that out there. But yeah,
so Don, just another one for you to think about: product enhancer.
Enhancer. Yeah.
Just something out there.
Yeah, I can see that. But I mean, that also assumes that the product already exists, maybe. Right? But if I'm building a new product, enhancers, we're the enhancers. Maybe. I see what you're saying. Delivery team was one that was we're going to move away from team. So deliverers of the product. But that means something different for like an oil company or, pharmaceutical company. Delivery is a whole other game downstream thing, right? But enhancers could work, yeah.
Lisa says team member.
But is the Scrum Master then not a team member? We did consider that, right? So the product owner, they're a team member. We were trying to get away from that. They're on the team and the others aren't, right? We actually, I'll tell you this, there was a version of the whole Scrum guide that just tried to be generic with it. So they said, the Scrum team is made up of team members. 2 of them have special accountabilities, the product owner and the Scrum Master.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was hard to write anything after that. When you wanted to talk about who comes up with the plan, the team members that are not the Scrum Master and the product owner, would size it, or the team members that are not participate in the daily Scrum. So it just made it a bit hard because we didn't want, one of the things we're fighting against is alienating the product owner. And that we found after trying to go down that road just didn't quite work as well. Yeah, I see. Honestly, I can't think of too many others. Those are the main things. Where we go next, I think even more along the lines of, I would say probably letting people know exactly what is possible with Scrum. Like I love the example of the dad working with the autistic child, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you reading the Scrum guide, you're going to think about using Scrum that way. Or a bunch of researchers doing experiments, right? If they were a little bit more clear on what an increment was, that an increment provides somebody outside the Scrum team value. It improves somebody's life if they were to apply it right now. So if it was a results from a bunch of research that we did in this sprint that we can give to somebody's willing to pay for, that can reduce costs or give us a better idea of which direction we should go in, that's value. And I don't think that's as clear. We always start thinking about we're building something, software, we're creating a book, we're creating, an increment of something. I think maybe there would be a good direction to head in.
I feel like we could do another session just on that topic alone.
Yeah, well, happy to. If you want to have me back, I'm happy to, yeah. But thank you all so much. Hopefully it was valuable. And if you want to continue the conversation, please add me on LinkedIn or send me an email or whatever. Hopefully you can tell I'm passionate around this topic. And so if you have any questions at all, we'd love to continue the conversation.
Don, thank you so much as always. Yes, it's very easy to tell that you are very passionate about this. So thank you again. So we're just coming up to 1 o'clock, everybody. So again, thank you very, very much for your time. Don, thank you for your time. I know that you're past lunch hour down where you are and everything, but it's always good to have you on. And like we said, we hope you all found this very, very relevant and got something from it. I know I sure did. So there you go. So once again, thanks so much on behalf of PMI-SAC. It was great to have you on board, and we look forward to seeing you very, very soon. We got our PDC coming up next month, so make sure to check that out. Don't forget to jump in on that. It's going to be an excellent, excellent day session as well too. So thanks very much, everyone. I hope you guys all have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye, everyone.